These are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the GreenSQL masking session. First of all, if you have any questions, you can write it down, or even better, you can mail it straight directly to us, and we'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Please feel free to ask us any question you might have. We'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions regarding GreenSQL dynamic data masking or any type of other information that comes regarding database security. My name is David Maman. I'm a CTO and founder in GreenSQL, and I'll be showing you. And in this session, we're going to talk specifically on dynamic data masking, how to ensure data privacy in real time. So, without a doubt, the number one security challenge today is information theft. And when we are talking about information theft, it's not just about the option that cyber criminals and also internal malicious or even non-malicious users have the option to retrieve sensitive information. GreenSQL comes to provide you the option to start controlling this chaos. One of the major issues that started in 2011 actually is the FBI have announced that data theft is a bigger criminal industry than drug trading. And this comes right after that. A lot of companies started researching into starting to understand what exactly have caused and what is the lead to this specific exposure of information. And it comes to the point that 96% of the data breaches and the information that have been stolen comes from database. If back at the day it was also about retrieving your mail from your home mailbox, and also it was about stealing backup tapes and so on, today everything is concentrated to your database. And as time passes, even though there's an endless number of security products like firewalls and web application firewalls and also intrusion prevention system and also code verification and code validation, as time passes we see that the problem is not solved. And even worse than that, in the screen in front of you, you can see just a few of the highlights of 2012, and there's been many, many others, that in these highlights it just shows how come the database is the final frontier. And even though some of these organizations have invested a lot of money with information security, without understanding that the final frontier and the focus of any attack today is about getting or changing your most sensitive information that most of the time is stored inside your database. And some of those major issues like Zappos by Amazon at the beginning of last year have lost all their information. And when I'm saying they lost, we as a customers of those organizations are the main suffering people, because anyone that stole my paying information from Zappos or any other of those major organizations can conduct a successful identity theft. He got my home address, he got my naturally my credit card information. All he have to do when he have also my email address, search on Facebook to get my my picture, my face picture. He then can print an ID. And when it's possible to print such an ID, now he can go, and these things actually happen on a daily basis in the United States. A person can go and open a bank account. A person can go and take a loan with a successful identity theft that have been caused by stealing information from such a website and web environment. In GreenSQL, we comes to provide you an all-in-one security. On this specific session, we're going to focus on masking, but we believe that today the focus should start and be focused on the database point, which is actually the final frontier. And when I'm saying the final frontier, many organizations, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about small or big organizations, are now starting to understand that the information of all their application is stored inside of the database. I know that it goes without saying that it's only making sense, but if until today many of their organizations were not focusing on how exactly they can secure and how exactly they can add security features to their database infrastructure, now everything is starting to change the past few years. So the problem, and naturally goes without saying that companies understand that the most sensitive information and the most high-level information of the company is stored inside the database. It doesn't matter if it's your financial information, your customer information, sometimes it's also HR, and even sometimes it's a very sensitive configuration information. And this type of information, when it's stored inside your database, you have most of the time two types of connection. The user-based connection, which can be your DBAs, it can be your QA or development staff, and the automated, any type of application, any type of automated process that have a connection to your database. Information theft have changed the last decade. If at the past it was very professional, people have conducted successful attacks on your database, today it's a lot of script kiddies that during their free time can download application like this specific application. It's called Havij. Havij application provides you an automated SQL injection attack mechanisms. People download this free tool from the internet. They have no knowledge whatsoever what is SQL injection attack. They have no knowledge how SQL injection is different between each database flavors like Oracle, like Postgres, or like Microsoft SQL Server. With this free application, you can conduct a successful SQL injection attack and actually retrieve all the information from a database. And this is a very immature solution for professionals. So they have a lot of their own metaframes and a lot of their own tools that they have developed in order to cause and create a successful attack on a database. So not only the thing is that it's become professional and professional people are now conducting attacks, we have to understand the attackability, which means attackability surface. When we are talking about a database and the database that stores the information, the attackability surface of a database contains a lot of different components. A database eventually is an application, and this application runs on an operating system. Once this operating system contains a lot of different features, a lot of different third-party application, and a lot of different components that runs in order to make sure that the operating system is run correctly. Each and every breach of any of these components can lead to a successful attack. And if we'll talk about Microsoft SQL Server, once we have a Microsoft Windows operating system running and we have Microsoft SQL installed on this component, each and every of these specific attack vectors can lead to a successful theft of the most sensitive information. And how come? Eventually, as I mentioned before, a database like Microsoft SQL or MySQL, eventually we're talking about files. And those files are stored on the operating system file system. So with any successful attack or any successful understanding of attack, I can then decide that my destination is just to steal those files. And any of these attack vectors can lead to a successful breach to your organization. I mentioned before a few words about SQL injections, and SQL injection attacks have become more and more professional, which means that if you have the option to download an application, you have the option to make sure you're running a command to a web front, and it will lead you to a successful attack of a database. This can cause your entire organization to lose information. And GreenSQL, just a few words about how GreenSQL works exactly. In GreenSQL, we decided to go forward with a reverse proxy approach, which means if your application, and when we are saying an application, it can be any application. It can be your development studio, it can be your web server, it can be your CRM application, or any type of other application, generates a query. If at the past it used to generate a query directly to the database server, once you have GreenSQL up and running, the connection will be ran only to the GreenSQL first. And after GreenSQL will provide the needed security, auditing, masking, or performance features, only then it will be forwarded to the database server. So we are talking about a front-end approach. Because GreenSQL is a software-based solution, you have the option to install it on any of the entities that contains your database infrastructure, which means GreenSQL can run on the application server. So in your application server, you'll be able to configure it with what's called a local connection strings, so it will connect to the database locally. And even though if the database is contained on a different server, then the connection will be forwarded by GreenSQL. You can install GreenSQL on a dedicated appliance or a dedicated virtual appliance. Actually, we also provide a virtual appliance ready to use with an hardened Linux operating system, and GreenSQL is automatically installed there. So if you can provide and you can afford a dedicated server or a dedicated virtual appliance, then GreenSQL will provide you the best performance. You'll be able to secure or run multiple features on multiple databases flavors or multiple database server installations. When we're talking about the new generation, which means a lot of companies used a cloud-based services and a lot of companies use what's called hosting solutions, then GreenSQL can be installed on the database server itself. It means that it doesn't matter which features of the features I'm mentioning every few minutes, you'll be able to enforce it and to enable it, and it doesn't matter on which of the three options you have decided to go forward with. So GreenSQL can be installed on your application server, it can be installed on your dedicated server or virtual appliance, or it can be installed on the database server itself. In order for us to explain you how deep GreenSQL goes, we are not a sniffer system. We are not what's called a signature-based security solution. In GreenSQL, we had to develop the full connection layer management, a full database application protocol analysis and understanding, and also to understand the entire depth of the SQL grammar. So that's the only way that we can then enforce different security solutions like a database firewall or like auditing or masking. So we provide a full front end to the database. More than that, once GreenSQL is up and running, no one should have the knowledge of where exactly the database server is located. You should never provide the real IP address, because during this process that we are a front end to the database, we are providing out of the box additional security features like protocol verification, removal of any unnecessary connection or an unfull connection to your database. And with those basic security features, we reduce dramatically the option of denial of service, and we reduce dramatically the option of trying to run a fuzzer to your database connectivity. And being a front end to the database is actually providing a full scale reduction of the attackability surface, because no one will have the option to directly connect to the database server. No one will have the option to connect directly. In this session, we're going to focus about the masking features. You're more than welcome to join us on other, by the way, sessions that we will discuss security, auditing, performance, and actually also additional features that we're going to talk about the synergy of a unified database security solution. So why exactly you need dynamic data masking and what exactly we're talking about? Real-time dynamic data masking eventually is a solution for a protection from internal and external threats. A threat can be something very minimal, like your CRM user have the option to see sensitive information. But a threat can be as well that an unauthorized source, even internal source, like your developer, like your QA personnel, should have access to this specific sensitive information. So GreenSQL provides you the option to enforce real-time dynamic data masking. The most important part understanding about real-time dynamic data masking is that the sensitive information never leaves the database. And how exactly real-time dynamic data masking works? With GreenSQL, because we're a full front end, any connection and any SQL string that is generated by an application passes through GreenSQL. And once you have configured inside of the management, and that's exactly what we're going to do now before I'll show you how exactly it works and we're going to have a running demo. If I have decided that I have 4 to 5 different columns that contain sensitive information, once a SQL query generated by an application is passing through GreenSQL and GreenSQL have detected that you're trying to retrieve sensitive information, GreenSQL injects a transformation function inside of the query before it's been sent to the database. And once we are doing the SQL rewrite, which means we inject the transformation function, the database receives a query that already includes the transformation function. So if the database is the entity that runs the masking mechanism, it means that only a masked information will be sent outside of the database. So real-time dynamic data masking is the only current masking solution that makes sure that a sensitive information will never leave the database server. How exactly the implementation process works? It's really important to explain that if you use a real-time dynamic data masking, you don't have to touch any part of your infrastructure. It's a full transparency to your application layer, meaning your application should not be changed, should not be edited, and there's no any impact once you install a GreenSQL dynamic data masking. There's a full transparency for your database. You should not touch anything. And a very important issue, that there is a full transparency when it comes to administrative overview and overhead. There's actually, as part of the masking, GreenSQL provides for free, once you purchase the masking package, a database performance feature. And one of the features of the database performance component is database caching. So the smart caching by GreenSQL provides you not only that the sensitive information never leave the database, and the database is the entity that masks the information. Using GreenSQL, you actually get increased performance and not degraded performance, because once the database have masked the sensitive information will be stored, the masked information will be stored in the GreenSQL caching process. So anytime an application will retrieve information that should be masked, it will be provided out of the GreenSQL solution, and there's no need to make this command run again on the database server. When it comes to real-time dynamic data masking, the policy is extremely easy, and I would like to walk you through the GreenSQL management interface. And the management interface is a web-based GUI. So once I've connected to the GreenSQL management interface, just to show you how easy it is to run a masking command, I will go to the data masking, which is the package that we are currently talking about. And inside the data masking, I will go to, oh, I apologize for that. Let's go to the appropriate machine. Okay, this is the GreenSQL with the password. Once I will go to the data masking, I will have the option to go to a policy. And inside the policy, I would like to create a new masking policy. When I create a new masking policy, I have the option to choose who exactly is the source that I will mask information for, which means I can limit it. I would like the masking to work only for my web server, or I would like only users that connect from my CRM application, the information will be masked for them, or even my outsourced DBA services. When they're trying to connect or trying to retrieve information from my sensitive columns, I would like it to be masked. So I can limit the database user, the application that is being used, and also the IP address from where the connection is being connected. And then all I have to do is just to choose which column exactly I would like to mask. And once, for example, I choose an email address as part of the columns that I'm going to enforce, then I can choose the different behaviors of masking. And this process that I've just showed you, that takes exactly 20 seconds, That's what it takes to have a successful masking working. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show how exactly the masking is working in a very simple and easy to view demo. So going back to understanding exactly how the masking works. As have you seen, it's extremely easy to run masking configuration. You can decide which is the source upon the masking is going to work and which column or table or even a full database destination the information will be enabled. Many times, a lot of the application is using only a one username to connect to the database, which means that the masking will be enforced to the entire application users. If you're working in a Windows Active Directory environment, one of the features that Microsoft provides you is what's called delegated authentication, delegated Kerberos authentication, also referred as double hop. What exactly it means? It means that your application will use the application user credentials. It will be forwarded to the database in order to conduct a retrieval or update of information inside of the database. So once you have a Kerberos environment, which means Active Directory with double hop is enabled, your application user will be viewed as part of your auditing logs. And this will provide you the option to have it up and running in a very easy manner when you enforce masking rules on your actually user, the application user. Just to give you an example, what it means when I'm talking about injection of a transformation function. If I have the most simple command like a select card number from sales credit card, and this query is generated by the application and is forwarded to the database. When GreenSQL receives this specific query, then GreenSQL transforms it to this select case when len card number bigger or equals to 4, then replace, and this query is what the database gets. And this type of communication between GreenSQL and the database is making sure that your sensitive information will never leave the database. And this is a very important factor because many what's called static data masking works in the most ETL traditional approach, which means it extracts the sensitive information, transform it to scrambled or masked information, and then uploads it to a side database server. And on this table you can see the exact differences between dynamic data masking and static data masking. When we're talking about static data masking, it's most of the time a third-party application or an in-house scripting that retrieves the information, masks it according to your policy, and then upload it to another database server. So you have to have additional database server and you have to maintain this database server. And many times you have to make this process of ETL sometimes on a nightly basis because the information have to be correct. When it comes to GreenSQL dynamic data masking, the entire process is in real time, which means this is a full and plain proxy. So your application from now on connects directly to the GreenSQL only, and the configuration is enforced automatically, just as simple as I've showed it before, and I will show it again in just a few seconds. So many companies naturally adopt the cloud infrastructure, and when we're talking about a cloud, we can talk about three main options. When you have only your application server running on a VPS, when you have your own virtual private network, or you are using a service by a cloud provider, a web application service, or sometimes it's a database service. Because GreenSQL is developed as a reverse proxy approach, you are not limited to the option in order to implement GreenSQL to run on a cloud environment. Actually, almost 30% of our customers use GreenSQL on a cloud infrastructure. Some of them use Windows Azure, some of them use Amazon or even Rackspace or any other cloud provider, but with GreenSQL, because of the reverse proxy, and this is a software deliverable solution, you're able to have it up and running on any infrastructure that you choose. So all the configuration in the demo that I'm going to show now is what's called ready, a cloud ready, because of the architecture we decided to use. It's important to say that currently GreenSQL supports Microsoft SQL, all versions from SQL 2000 until SQL 2012, including Microsoft SQL Azure. If you choose to get a service from Microsoft as a database service, GreenSQL is compatible completely to provide you all those features on Microsoft SQL Azure. All versions of MySQL, all versions of MariaDB, and all versions of PostgreSQL are also supported by GreenSQL. So in this demo, I would like to keep it simple and easy to understand and to view. When you have managers in your DBAs, in your infrastructure, you are using Visual Studio. And as you can see, this is a very simple management studio to manage your database. And in this configuration, we have multiple database servers running on the infrastructure. So we have here AdventureWorks database, and if we'll go to the database itself, we can see that it contains a lot of different tables and columns, and I can get and view the information. And the most basic commands that you can see in front of you is a select top 1000 of all the information inside person and contact. And as you can see, we have email addresses, we have a lot of phone numbers, and we have a lot of different information. Besides this specific query, I would like also to retrieve human resources employee. And here we can see that I have a lot of my employees' HR information also located inside of the database. With GreenSQL, just to show you how easy and simple it is to run and to manage this masking, in order to reduce the threat that an outsourced DBA or a developer will be able to retrieve this information. When we connect to the GreenSQL, we will go to the policy available inside GreenSQL, and you can see the first policy that we're talking about is that any source that is trying to retrieve the email address from contact and person, this information will be masked using the behavior of basic email masking. So let's just view, first of all, the information before I enforce the masking configuration. So in this query, we can see that we retrieved, and let's just run it again. We have retrieved all the information, and we can see the email address is on plain text, and we can understand it. Once I will enable this command, and this policy will be enabled, anyone that tries to retrieve this information, and I will just execute it again, we will see that the email address have been masked. And you can see we have chosen to use what we decided to call basic email masking. If I would like to run full email masking, we will not mask only the characters contained in the email address headers, but we will, let's generate it again, we will mask everything besides the last extension of the email address. So, for example, we have a lot of organizations that are using outsourced development and outsourced DBA services. So once you have your DBA services up and running, and your DBA consultant services, they can connect and manage your database, but they should never have the option to view sensitive information. And another example, we can see that under human resource, employee, we can see all this sensitive information. But the login ID information and the title are sensitive, and the DBA should never have the access to retrieve this sensitive information. So in GreenSQL, just to show you how easy this policy to create, I choose the AdventureWorks database that is configured. I then go to columns, and I choose under human resource, under employee, I decided to mask the login ID, and I also the national ID number, and also the title. So any outsourced personnel or internal application that tries to retrieve this information, it should be masked. And I will choose to mask all. using and replacing it with an X instead of a 0. Once I have this configured, all I have to do is just to refresh this specific command, and you can see that this information is currently masked. And we decided to mask it now, those 3 columns of national ID number, login ID, and title in real time. Nothing have been affected. The application is up and running. The database server is the entity that masks this sensitive information. And as you can see from the refresh, it's running extremely fast, and nothing is affecting the performance, even though I'm masking the sensitive information. This was a very basic demo for you to understand how you can enforce masking even for your internal DBAs or to the external DBA services or consulting services that you hire. A lot of organizations cannot afford internal professional DBAs, so they're using outsourced services. With GreenSQL up and running, you can make sure that your sensitive information will not leak. People will not retrieve this sensitive information. So, summing it up, we are talking about GreenSQL as a all-in-one package. At this demonstration and demo, I talked about dynamic data masking, but it's extremely easy to run any of the other features provided by GreenSQL within minutes, talking about auditing, talking about database firewall, database separation of duties, or any of the other features. In GreenSQL, this is one of the most important parts for us, that you will have a system up and running within minutes and not within days or within months. And we have a lot of customers, and you are more than welcome to download an evaluation version from our website to check the masking features, to check how easy it is to implement on MySQL, on Microsoft SQL, on other SQL flavors that are supported by GreenSQL, the masking features and any other features. We have quite a few customers that have been using it for quite a long time. I would like to thank you for your time. I've just seen that there are a few questions. We will answer each and every one. We will contact you directly. If you have any other questions, or if you would like to have a personal demo or a personal session with us, we'll be more than happy to provide it. Please feel free to contact us at any time. I would like to thank you again for your time and to wish you a great day. Thank you again, and please join us again in our next session within 2 weeks or so, when we're going to talk about the unified database security. Have a great day, everyone.